Imagine having the chance to discover 10 stories from the Bible that are so deep and mysterious that most pastors avoid commenting on them. Stories that reveal the most enigmatic and surprising side of the Scriptures. In this video, we will explore rare accounts that speak of courage, divine judgments, and even a battle between good and evil in the spiritual world. And at the end, I will reveal a little-known story that might change the way you see the entire Bible. Get ready, because what you are about to hear will surprise you. We begin with a story you might have never heard in detail: the origin of the people of Cush, a powerful African nation often forgotten in the biblical narrative. Cush, a descendant of Ham, is the patriarch of a strong and influential lineage mentioned in Genesis 10. But the story becomes even more intriguing when we find Moses' Cushite wife in Numbers 12. Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses for this marriage, which led God to intervene in a surprising way, defending Moses and punishing Miriam with leprosy for her prejudice. This shocking event highlights that, to God, there is no division between races or nations. He values every people and acts against any injustice. But it doesn't stop there. The Cushites appear several times in the Bible as a symbol of strength and dominance. In 2 Chronicles 14, we read about Zerah, a Cushite general who invades Judah with an army of 1 million men. And once again, the Lord intervenes, granting victory to Judah. This impressive story shows us how God governs over all nations, using each of them to reveal his justice and sovereignty. So, what does this story have to do with us? The nation of Cush reminds us that God values every culture, and in his plan, no one is forgotten. If you have ever questioned the value of your own origins, remember that God sees and honors every story, regardless of race or borders. And this is just the beginning of what the Bible hides. Stay until the end and get ready for more surprising revelations. Now imagine the courage needed to confront a powerful enemy general, alone. The story of Jael is an impressive example of how God uses ordinary people to fulfill his plans in extraordinary ways. In Judges 4, Sisera, the general of the Canaanite army, flees after a defeat and seeks refuge in the tent of Jael, an apparently harmless woman. He felt safe there, accepted hospitality, and even slept, thinking he was secure. But Jael had a purpose given by God. While Sisera slept, Jael used a tent peg to take the life of the general, ending the threat and bringing victory to the people of Israel. This act was prophesied by the judge and prophetess Deborah, who had said that God would deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. This uncommon victory reveals how God often chooses the unlikely to fulfill his purposes, turning moments of weakness into powerful victories. The story of Jael challenges us to reflect: are we ready to act with courage when God calls us? Even without military skills, Jael was used to win a crucial battle. This example reminds us that, in the face of challenges, we should not underestimate the role God can give us. He uses those who are willing to obey and act, no matter how they appear or the circumstances. May Jael's courage inspire all those who seek to be ready to respond to the divine call, whether big or small. This is a story that leaves anyone perplexed. Imagine being a prophet, obeying a mission from God, and in the end, facing a deadly consequence for a small disobedience. In 1 Kings 13, God instructs a prophet to prophesy against the altar of Jeroboam, and on his way back, not to eat, drink, or return by the same road. But on his return, another man, lying, convinces him to break this order. And what seemed like an innocent invitation turns into something fatal. A lion attacks him on the way, killing him, but curiously, without devouring his body or the donkey that was with him. This story is a strong reminder of the seriousness of obedience to God. The prophet was not attacked because of malice, but because he allowed himself to be swayed by a voice that contradicted God's. This account makes us question, how many times have we allowed external voices to lead us away from what we know to be God's will? It shows us that even when we are sincere, we cannot ignore the importance of following every word from the Lord precisely. If there is a deep lesson here, it is that partial obedience is not enough. This story challenges each of us to ask, are we being faithful even in the small things? The story of the prophet killed by a lion teaches us to watch so that nothing leads us astray from God's truth, reminding us that obedience is an act of love and reverence to the Creator. Imagine witnessing a meeting in heaven where spirits are deliberating on how to bring down a king. In 1 Kings 22, the prophet Micaiah reveals a vision of God on his throne, surrounded by heavenly armies, asking who would be willing to deceive Ahab to bring him to his death in battle. Among the spirits, one offers to place a lying spirit in the mouths of Ahab's prophets. God permits it, and that spirit leads Ahab to his fatal destiny. This vision is not just a narrative, it reveals the extent of God's sovereignty, even allowing deceptions to happen to fulfill his purpose. Ahab had rejected the truth for a long time, and this illusion was the harvest of his choices. The story shows that the Lord may even use human resistance for his own designs, something that challenges our understanding but reinforces God's absolute power over good and evil. What does this passage teach us? It is a clear warning about the dangers of turning away from the truth and only seeking words that comfort us. How often do we also want to hear only what pleases us? This story is a reminder that truth is not always convenient, but it is the only way to life. May we seek God's truth, even when it challenges our understanding or requires sacrifices. The story of the daughters of Zelophehad is one of the most impactful lessons of justice and courage in the Bible, showing God's care for those whom society forgets. In Numbers 27, we see Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah approaching Moses and the leaders of Israel with a bold question for the time. Since their father had passed away without leaving sons, the family inheritance was to go to other relatives. But instead of accepting this exclusion, they claimed their right to their father's inheritance. This action was revolutionary. Moses took their request to the Lord, and God commanded that they receive their portion. This not only ensured justice for these women, but also set a precedent for similar cases in the future, showing that God listens and acts in favor of the forgotten and unjustly treated. The divine response was clear and direct, establishing that He is a God of justice who values the voice of the oppressed. This story is not just an ancient account, it carries a timeless message. If we've ever faced situations where justice seemed distant or our rights seemed forgotten, the story of the daughters of Zelophehad reminds us that God always sees and acts. Just as He listened to the courage of these women, He also calls us to have the boldness to seek what is just. God is faithful to answer those who cry out for justice, and this is an invitation to never stop trusting in His goodness and fairness. This is one of the most mysterious moments in the book of Zechariah. In Zechariah 5, the prophet has a vision of a large ephah, a type of measuring container that contains a personification of iniquity or sin. Suddenly, two women with wings like storks appear and carry this ephah to the land of Shinar, a place known for its history of idolatry and rebellion against God. But what does this vision mean? It represents God's judgment and the purification of His people, removing iniquity from Israel and taking it to a place where it would be destined for destruction. God will not allow sin to remain in the midst of His people, and with this image, He makes it clear that there is a limit to His tolerance of evil. The scene of the two women carrying away sin is a symbolic message that God takes sin seriously and that nothing is hidden from Him. This passage challenges us to examine our own lives. Are we allowing any type of iniquity to remain hidden in our hearts? This vision reminds us that God sees everything and is always willing to purify us. The story invites us to seek holiness and let the Lord cleanse what separates us from Him. This vision may seem unusual, but it is both a warning and an invitation to live a pure life before God. The story of the prophet Agabus is a powerful example of how prophecy can mobilize a response of solidarity. In Acts 11, Agabus announces a great famine that would affect the entire Roman world. This warning was not just a prediction, it woke the church to action. Instead of panicking, the Christians organized to send help to their brothers in Judea, revealing a unity and generosity that strengthened the early church. This gesture reveals much about the purpose of prophecy. It is not just to warn, but to inspire actions of love and care. The early church saw this crisis as an opportunity to practice solidarity, turning fear into a chance to express Christ's love. Agabus's prophecy became a call to strengthen the bond among believers and care for those in need. This story challenges us to think, how have we responded to the crises and difficulties around us? Just like the church in Acts, we are called to be a source of support and compassion, especially in tough times. Agabus teaches us that when God alerts us, He also equips us to make a difference. May we be like those early Christians, ready to act with generosity and unity, showing Christ's love to the world. Imagine a lavish banquet, where the king, in utter arrogance, decides to use the sacred utensils from the temple in Jerusalem to drink and praise pagan gods. This was the last act of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. In Daniel 5, we read that, while the banquet was in full swing, an invisible hand appeared and began writing on the wall. The words were enigmatic: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. Fear seized everyone, and the king, desperate, searched for someone who could decipher the meaning. Daniel was called, and his interpretation was a fatal blow. God had counted and weighed Belshazzar's kingdom and determined its end. That very night, the empire was invaded, and Belshazzar lost his life. This dark scene reveals the severe side of divine justice, where arrogance and disregard for the sacred result in immediate judgment. This story is a powerful warning. How many times have we treated what is holy with contempt or indifference, not realizing that there are consequences? Belshazzar thought he could mock what was sacred, but found out in the worst way that God is not indifferent. For us, it's a lesson about the reverence and respect we must have before the Lord. May we remember this story as an invitation to live with reverence and awe, knowing that God cares for what is His. The story of the birth of Perez and Zerah is full of mystery and significance, revealing God's surprising intervention in the lineage of Jesus. In Genesis 38, Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law, becomes pregnant with twins. During the birth, something strange happens. Zerah extends his hand first, and the midwife ties a scarlet thread on his hand, marking him as the firstborn. But in an unexpected moment, Perez is born first, breaking the established order and taking the place of the firstborn. His name, meaning breakthrough, symbolizes this rupture and divine intervention in the succession. This event is more than a twist. It is a message about how God chooses whom He wills, regardless of human tradition or expectations. In Matthew 1, Perez is mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus, showing that God orchestrates even the seemingly chaotic details to fulfill His purposes. Perez, the unlikely one, becomes part of something much greater, the lineage that would bring the Savior into the world. This story challenges us to see interruptions and ruptures in our own lives as part of God's divine plan. God can use unexpected moments to guide and shape us in ways we don't immediately understand. May we learn from the story of Perez and Zerah to trust in God's sovereign purpose, which always chooses with wisdom and purpose. These little-known stories show us that the Bible is much deeper and more mysterious than we often realize. In Jeremiah 33:3, God invites us, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and show you great and mighty things which you do not know." He has secrets to reveal to those who seek him with a sincere heart. And each of these passages is a reminder that God works in surprising ways to fulfill his purposes. May these stories inspire you to continue exploring the Bible, to never settle for just what's on the surface. The Lord calls us to discover the hidden riches of his word. May we have that desire to learn more and to be transformed by the knowledge of his truth.